I will free them all. Hello and welcome to Liam's Lyceum. I'm your host Liam, aka Hanuvar, and today I'll be doing a spoiler-free review of Howard Andrew Jones's The City of Marble and Blood. The City of Marble and Blood is a 2023 novel by Howard Andrew Jones and the second in the Chronicles of Hanuvar, following Lord of a Shattered Land, which just came out a couple months ago and I did a review for that. It starts where the last left off, and the map shows us its in closer detail the area near the Ardenine Mountains and down to Derva. Essentially, it's called Tyvol, if I'm saying that correctly. And then it opens with something like this, freely adapted from the Hanuvid of Antirus Socilos the Elder, with the commentary of Silenus and Dronikos Socilos the Younger. And that's continuing the framing narrative through that later stuff was added. It doesn't peek through as much as it does in like something like Sun Eater, but you do get this idea of like, oh, and this would be a pain later type of thing. And of course, it's several generations later that this is being written technically. We get a preamble once more, and this one's not quite as bone-chilling, I felt like, as the first, but we've already seen Hanuvar in action at this point, and the preamble works as a re-promise of Hanuvar finding and setting his people free after the destruction of their nation. We also get a continuation of the episodic format. This is essentially Season 2 of Hanuvar. It should please modern readers, especially its length, and Sword and Sorcery readers used to fix-ups. Not to mention, it's an expert blending of, epic fantasy and Sword and Sorcery elements. So not very epic in a lot of ways, just the length and just the way it's put together. Jones definitely knows what he's doing, but at the same time, it's not really a fix-up. So I'm not sure I've seen much or anything like this before. So Hanuvar wishes to build homes here, docks and ships to put his people on. And he's, of course, acting as he's Vidurvan most of the time. And Tiras is still his companion, as he was for most of the first book, though he will be in Salanto for some of this book, while Hanuvar is elsewhere. The two are in the woods and spying on people at an unsettling shrine away from town at the start of this one, though. The first story is wild in a couple ways, and it gets a great start to a now even more intriguing story. Blessings and curses are often two sides of the same coin, as we kind of see here. Stories then take very different flavors while continuing the quest. It is very much, again, like a TV show, such as Merlin, which changes tone and pace every episode or chapter, but continues the overall plot, too. Of course, this isn't Cable, and the chapters vary in length, and most have their own sub-chapters as well. Of course, Cyprian promised to help Hanuvar in Book 1 and goes for such aid here. He will encounter obstacles, Villani who aren't all slaves, or really that good maybe, and maybe some that are even assimilated into Durban society. He is essentially starting at the bottom, though, but he's gotten somewhere from at the end of the first book. But he had some old pieces kind of on the board that maybe have helped too. We get to see Derva itself, which isn't surprising based off of Hanuvar's goals from the first book and the title of this book. But overall, we get a bunch of stuff, right? We get passion and love, aging bones, heist, humor, veterans and combat, sorcery, stuff that's maybe not quite as dark as sorcery, I'd say. We get the undead, we get murder, all while keeping the focus on the character as much as modern works do, and Sword and Sorcery I feel like has always done. It's such a good focus that things aren't life and death at all times, but they are intense, and from the focus on little matters to those of the Villani as a whole. The shifting is expertly done, and it goes from mundane to weird and eldritch swiftly. At the same time, there is, of course, this fear that, if things are found out, if Hanuvar is exposed, then a lot of people will probably die. Innocence, of course. I think third person works really well here as well. We get enough of Hanuvar's thoughts and perspectives, but where we really get to see, who he is. We are shown the person he is, and he doesn't always succeed. The context of the series is based off failure, in fact, and he's not infallible, and also, not a god, essentially, or a demigod really capable of the impossible. Fate isn't always kind, and this perspective also gives us events focused on other characters important to the tales. This one also seems to have more space between stories, at least in some cases. It's not between all stories, but I felt like it was a little bit more than book one, but maybe I'm wrong there. But this allows for things to progress without becoming boring or tedious. Don't worry, you don't miss important things, but there are things going on in the background or just kind of happening while other things are happening too. And you're not really going to get those point of views. Now, in some stories, you'll, of course, get a point of view other than Hanuvar's, but only as it really pertains to a story that Hanuvar is part of at the time. We do have a lot of interesting characters here as well. Carthalo, Isavar, Brutus, Lucius, Anarius, many others as well. Just to name a few that stood out to me. And it's interesting that we get them at certain times and not at other times. Even Gaius is a very interesting character, I feel like, and Metellus even. But they definitely bring the world to life and give it a sense of vitality. I think Jones's character work is very well done. He's got a lot of practice at this point, though. Another worthy thing to note of Jones's capabilities here is that most of these stories are actually in the city, as opposed to the countryside of Book One. It's not Lenkmar, but more of Lenkmar as Rome, so to speak. It's Derva, right? Many of these stories also involve human cruelty more than straight monsters. There's a little bit less sorcery here. It feels a little less eldritchy. I'm not so scared of mushrooms in this one. It's a change-up that shows in several ways the variety sword and sorcery can do, and be, including Murder Mystery episode and others we haven't had before. But it also just showcases Jones's skill and understanding of that. Like this is very much pulp in a lot of ways. It reads like a lot of the best adventure pulp stories and similar stories that you got back in the day. The ones that are still worth reading today, of course, for those who don't read pulp. But there are episodes on slavery, and there's the plight of women. Abortion in particular actually is confronted. Being misguided as well is one of those things that we're confronted. And we get to travel to lands far away and those close. It's at times otherworldly and at times is very familiar. Feels very grounded most of the time, though. And then we also, of course, get a preview of Book 3 at the end, which is called Shadow of the Smoking Mountain, which is very nice. I'm excited to read that one, though. I believe we have a longer wait in between Book 2 and 3 than we did between Book 1 and 2. Can't always be so blessed by Jovrin, I guess is Jove here. Anyways, Liam from Liam's Lyceum, I really enjoyed this one, and I'm looking forward to reading more in this series and more by Jones between the third books released in this. So anyways, Liam from Liam's Lyceum, I will catch you next time.